Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This will be the second video that I make for the series, and although I was going to do a carpet setup video on the car, unfortunately we're back in lockdown again in the UK, which means I've got no chance. So I managed to do a few hours at a carpet track, and we've got a few settings on the car that I suspect were going to be my starting point. There's a little bit of fine-tuning to do left on the electric side of things. I want to get the boost and the turbo a little bit more dialed in on this somewhere. We're close, we're pretty close. So I've gone back to the 10.5. We've changed some rear link positions, rear springs. We have a different, so I've got some Ackerman spacers in the front. So I think we've got a 2.5mm spacer in there now, just to get that lead wheel just to kick over a little bit quicker on the towards the end of the lock. So just adjusting the Ackerman slightly there. But I thought today I'd do a video on the slide rack. I'll quickly show you how to pop the slide rack out real quick for maintenance, and I'll go through where to put shims if you need any, to eliminate most of the play in the rack. You don't want to get rid of all of it, but get rid of quite a bit of it. A massive chunk of it will make the car track a little bit better. If you take too much out, you'll find, or if you take too much slop out of the front end, you'll find that the car will it be a bit twitchy, a bit nervous. I find that takes a bit of that out, having a little bit of play, so I prefer to have my ball ends with a little bit of play in. But certainly up and down play on the slide rack could potentially mean that the bearings are rubbing against the carbon sandwich plates, which is something we don't want to happen. Now on my car, I don't know if I noticed this if I said this in my previous video, but my slide rack is actually lowered by 2mm. And the reason for this is, I'll just try and demonstrate quickly. It's a bit of a funny thing to do on camera, because of the camera angle. I'm not going to go grabbing it and moving it around. Basically, this slide rack is on or the curved slide rack is on an angle to get rid of the bump steer on the inside wheel. Now, what's been noted before, I think Tac Hero does this as well, is when the car pitches into a corner, the lead wheel is absolutely fine, but the trailing wheel, you may find that as the car rolls in, the trailing wheel will lose a bit of angle there. Now, I believe on especially on hard surfaces such as P-tile, this just takes away a little bit of the stability from the front end. It's almost like having an Ackerman adjustment mid corner. So as obviously the chassis rolls in and then settles back down again, when you flicked it into the corner or flicked it into the drift, this link here ends up being quite nice and horizontal rather than at an angle. So once that link becomes an angle, it will start to pull the wheel around. So yeah, the rack is basically lowered, and it's quite simple to do. It's not a difficult modification. There's two 2mm shims just underneath where the rack's mounted to on the bulkhead. I'm still running the old bulkhead. Don't see the need for the new one just yet. I'll probably wait for one to come along. No rush there. Yeah, so I'll show you how to pop this kiddie out real quick. We'll go through a couple of maintenance tips, and yeah, we'll go from there. So I'm going to do this all in one take. There's no point in mucking around with loads of editing on a video like this. We're going to pop the wheels off first, obviously. So blue nut, red nut. Red's on the left hand side of the car. 10 points to anybody that can tell me why I run red on one side and blue on the other. Right, okay, so we're going to go, first of all, we're going to undo the hub ball studs at the ends. So a quick way to do this is try and get the ball stud lined up with the hole in the ball end. So push the suspension up slightly, and then you'll find that you'll be able to get the driver in there nice and easy without having to pop those ball ends off and adding wear to them. So if these were brand new ball ends and I was going to change them on the front of my car, and I wanted to put a bit of play into them because they were too tight, or I wanted to manufacture a little bit of play into them, I'd pop them off the ball studs a few times. Or the other way you can do it is you can actually get a pair of pliers and you can pinch ever so gently, pinch the plastic all the way around, and that will effectively dent the inside of the ball end, which will give you a little bit of play there, and it'll make that run nice and free. Another little tip there. Right, so the next one is we're going to undo the servo horn. So I'm running the aluminium servo horn, the Yokomo one, just because I can do this endless amounts of times and it won't really damage the threads as much as plastic. The aluminium one is a little bit stiffer, but the main reason I've got it there is for mainly maintenance. Right, so let's show you these two little 2mm spacers that are a bit fiddly to get in and out, but there's a trick to it. So you undo one of your bolts, put that to one side, and then if you just loosen the other side a little bit, right, moved a lot there, you should be able to find those little spacers without too much trouble, without them flying off and going underneath your pit bench or your dining room table, or if you're in your kitchen, there's a thing called fridge suck, so they'll end up under the fridge every single time. So we'll loosen that. We're going to take our screw that we took out first, put that back in. Just helps balance the rack in there while we find the other shim. Now the reason I'm doing it this way is so I can sort of show you the it's fitting them back in is the reverse of this. So you'll see at the end of the video when I pop them back in how I can get them in quite easily. So there's no need to take the bulkhead completely off this car to get the rack out. You can slide it out to the left if you're looking at the car face on without causing any damage. He says as he starts to struggle. Because I've popped that link under there. There we go. So yeah, there's the rack. Get that screw back out. Okay, get her out of the way. So this is a slide rack. I've had this one, God, I think this is getting on for 2 years now, this one. There's nothing wrong with it. There's hardly any wear on it, if any. I think I've managed to smooth out the there was a tiny little machining on these faces in here. That's no longer there, so that the rack actually runs even smoother as it beds in. Now the first modification I made to this was I noticed that these cams, especially this little bugger here, this one sometimes caught on this carbon fibre triangle piece. Now the carbon piece I've lowered, there's some 1/2 mil shims in there, 1/2 mil aluminium shims, just to space that down a bit. It doesn't have any sort of effect on the throw of the steering. If it does, it's very, very minimal. But that means that in any situation, if there was any sort of play or flex in here, that's not going to catch on there and bind the steering up. So that was the first mod. Secondly, in the manual they tell you to measure this to a certain length or whatever. I found that I think that's a 2 and that's a 1, so we've got 3 mil of spacing in here, and that's nice and stiff now. There's no bendiness in the middle of that link. So you can see there's a little red 1 mil and a 2 mil black spacer. Obviously you could put a complete 3 mil in there, but that's probably all I had to hand when I threw the thing together. You can see the Ackerman spacers there. So the carpet setting I've added, I think that's a 2.5 mil shim there, just for future reference. Now the other bit that you do with these racks when you build them is on these cams, on the original instructions from Yokomo, which I wrote actually, you'll see that these have got a little notch on them, and you can set them. A lot of the racks are, I think it's manufacturing tolerances, ever so slightly different. So where these cams end up might not necessarily be exactly what you need on those instructions. So use it as a guide, and then try and sort of have a feel. If it feels rough, if it feels notchy, they're probably too tight. So you need to back those away a bit. So I'll try and demonstrate where these little notches are on mine. So the notch is where the fat spot is on the cam. So that's at roughly that angle. The one on the other side is about there, and then the front one is about there. So they're all very similar. They're not dead straight at their tightest, so they've been backed off just a little bit. But there's no play at all in this. It's absolutely fine. Now the rear bearings, where I said to put the shims originally was, I think in this one I've got a 0.2 in this side. I don't think I've got any in there, and then I've got a 0.1 in the front. Okay, and the shims that we use, the Yokomo part number is ZC-S40S, and that will get you some 4mm inner diameter shims like this, stainless steel, and you can see they come in, I mean this isn't the Yokomo one, this is a different brand, but you can see 0.1 of a mil, 0.2 of a mil, and 0.3 of a mil. I think the Yokomo have got 0.5 as well. Now ideally for my rack I would have liked a 0.15 for this side, but unfortunately I couldn't find one. So I put a 0.2 in there, which took out 98% of the play. It's lovely, but what I did find with that shim in there was it got a little bit tight towards one end, on the throw of the rack there. So what I did was something, took me a couple of months to figure this out, but after a while I was like, do you know what, I think I've got it. So I did this. It's a very simple solution. Take these little button screws out of here. These look super cool in there. They're just the Reve D wing mount screws. So we'll pop those off there, and then I'll be able to show you. So under here is a tiny bit of green double-sided tape backing. So it's just a thin bit of plastic basically. That has spaced that carbon top piece enough away from my bearings so it doesn't rub on there ever so slightly, and the rack is perfectly smooth and it's got exactly the right amount of play in it. Yeah, so that's my little special modification. I'm very proud of that one. So let's put those screws back in there. Try not to lose that little bit of slither of plastic in there. So yeah, that's how I've adjusted this rack anyway, or this slide rack, to be, I believe, as good as I can possibly get it in my hands. Just small little tweaks, everything adds up to the bigger picture at the end. So that's nice and free. There's no tight spots, there's no nothing. Now, one thing that I have seen people do in the past, I know it's not really something that everybody does, but do not put any lubrication on these faces. It's just, all it does is attracts dirt, and you end up with it sticking, notchy. I would periodically take this out of the car, just for maintenance, and I'll just give it a nice gentle clean. If it needs any more than that, so if any of the gunk has got up by the carbon, yeah, strip it down, put it back together again. But generally they just need a quick wipe. If there's anything stuck, any sort of drive shaft grease or something that's flicked up or whatever, you get that off, and then you'll still end up with a nice smooth rack. Now, I wouldn't recommend sanding any of this down, any of this aluminium piece especially, because it's got hardened anodized coating on it, which is why I'm using bits of plastic for shims instead of sanding anything or gluing anything up. So yeah, that's my slide rack. Now I'll show you how to put it back in the car. Hopefully this will be relatively painless. I normally do this off camera without thinking about it, and it's as straightforward as it comes. Let's get that in. So basically slide it back in the way it came out. The linkage I like to do up first is the one for the servo. So if I try and get that into position, somewhere near, get the driver in it first. So again, driver in the hole at the top of the ball end. Try and grab the ball stud. I'm not going to be able to do this on camera. How embarrassing. Oh, we could be in, No, right, okay, that's fine. I'm going to leave that. I'll come back to that in a minute. So we'll start with one of these. So the main rack screw, no spacers. We're just going to line the rack up with the holes, drop that down, tighten that in a few turns just to support the rack in the air. I'm going to take one of the 2mm spacers. I'm just going to put it on top of the steering rack, somewhere around, and then we're just going to poke it into position. Take the second rack screw and we'll drop that in there. It should find the way through. Yeah, there we go. So then we'll take out the first one. I'll probably nip that up just a touch more so the rack's a bit straighter. Okay, lay the shim on top again. I should have done this with silver shims, it would have been easier for you to see. I missed it that time. It's as fiddly as you make it. There we go. Straight in, it's relatively easy. So the other thing with this old bulkhead as well is it's got a little bit of movement when you tighten these screws up. So if you're not careful, you can put it in a slight angle. So we'll get that as good as I can get it by eye, which is usually good enough. There we go. Right. So again, we're going to line up the ball end first, and there we go. And then if we push the suspension up, we've got less chance of cross-threading anything, which we don't want. Same the other side. Okay. Nice and free. Now I've got to try and get that pesky link in that I can normally do with no problem whatsoever. That's because I can't put my fat head in the way of the camera to get the driver in the ball end. I promise you this is normally very easy and I can do this with my eyes shut. Just not today. Which is bloody typical. What the hell is going on here? Why can't I just do that? Normally just sits on top of the servo saver when you put the rack back in. Maybe too much coffee. Yeah, blame it on the coffee. There we go. So we've got it lined up. There we are. So that's that nipped up, that's that done. So we have our nice free moving slide rack with minimal play. Like I say, you get rid of all of it, you're probably going to make it bind up. Also, if you get rid of too much, the car will feel too direct. It'll almost be like, I don't know, the only way I can describe it is being tram-liney maybe. So your steering inputs will be a little bit sharp, or a little bit too sharp. I'll tighten those back up. Okay, there we go. So all done. Again, if there's any questions, any videos you'd like to see me do, apart from, well, not ones where it involves me dancing, anything you want to see, if you want to see a shock build or something like that, please let me know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and see you soon. Thank you.